The room fell quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the air itself had stopped moving. Cameras were already rolling, red lights blinking like watchful eyes, when Elizabeth Warren leaned into her microphone and delivered the line that would echo far beyond the hearing room. Her voice was calm, almost dismissive, as she gestured toward John Kennedy and said, "With all due respect, Senator, you sound like a relic of the past." A few people chuckled, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Kennedy didn't move at all. He just sat there, hands folded, eyes steady, absorbing the words as if he'd heard them many times before. For a moment, it seemed like the insult might hang unanswered, the kind of silence that invites speculation. Was he stunned? Was he angry? Or was he already planning something far more devastating than a raised voice or a sharp retort? Those who knew John Kennedy well understood that silence, that measured pause, was never emptiness. It was preparation. The hearing had been tense from the start. The topic itself was complex, tangled in policy details and moral arguments, but beneath it all was something more personal. Warren had come armed with data, charts, and the confidence of someone used to dominating rooms. Kennedy had come with nothing more visible than a legal pad, a pen, and that familiar half-smile that people often underestimated. To some, he looked old-fashioned, even out of place. To others, he looked like a man who had seen enough storms to know which ones mattered. Warren pressed on after her comment, her words flowing smoothly, framing Kennedy's positions as outdated and disconnected from modern realities. She spoke of progress, of new generations, of moving forward instead of clinging to old ways. As she talked, a few heads nodded. The narrative was easy to accept. New versus old, future versus past, relic versus reformer. Kennedy listened without interrupting. His face revealed little, but inside, memories stirred. He remembered his father's voice, telling him that dignity was not something you demanded, but something you demonstrated. He remembered long nights studying law, learning that words, when chosen carefully, could cut deeper than anger ever could. And he remembered every time someone had mistaken his accent, his age, or his demeanor for weakness. When Warren finally finished, she leaned back slightly, satisfied, as if she had landed a decisive blow. The chair recognized Kennedy, and he slowly leaned forward. He didn't rush, he didn't raise his voice. He looked directly at Warren, then briefly at the audience, and finally into the nearest camera, as if he were speaking not just to the room, but to millions watching from home. "Senator Warren," he began softly, "I've been called a lot of things in my life. Some of them were true, some of them weren't." A faint ripple of laughter moved through the room. Kennedy paused just long enough for it to settle. "But when someone calls me a relic of the past, I can't help but smile, because the past is where we learned what happens when we forget humility, when we let power outrun wisdom." Warren's expression tightened, just slightly. Kennedy continued, his tone still calm, almost conversational. "You see, the past taught us that good intentions don't always produce good outcomes. It taught us that big promises, when not grounded in reality, can hurt the very people they're meant to help. And it taught us that progress isn't about erasing what came before us, but understanding it." The room grew quieter. Even those who disagreed with him leaned in, compelled by the rhythm of his words. Kennedy wasn't attacking, he wasn't mocking, he was building something, brick by brick. He glanced down at his notes for the first time. "I've read your proposals, Senator, every word, and I admire your passion, truly, but passion without restraint can be dangerous. History shows us that, and if remembering history makes me a relic, then maybe we need more relics in this room." There it was, not a shout, not an insult, just a reframing so precise it landed with weight. A few murmurs spread through the audience. Warren opened her mouth as if to respond, then closed it again, choosing instead to listen. Kennedy wasn't finished. "You talk about the future as if it belongs to one generation alone, but the future belongs to all of us. To the young mother working 2 jobs, to the factory worker wondering if his job will exist next year, to the student drowning in debt. They don't need slogans, they need solutions that last." His voice cracked just a little on the word last, not with weakness, but with sincerity. For a brief moment, the political theater fell away, and what remained was a man speaking from experience, from decades of watching policies rise and fall, promises made and broken. Warren shifted in her seat. She had expected a clash, a defensive reaction she could counter. Instead, she was facing something harder to fight: quiet authority. Kennedy looked at her again, not with contempt, but with something closer to disappointment. "Calling names might feel good in the moment," he said, "but it doesn't build bridges. And last I checked, this job wasn't about winning arguments. It was about serving people." The chair called time, but the damage or the revelation had already been done. Cameras zoomed in, social media feeds lit up, clips of the exchange spread within minutes, captions arguing over who had won, who had been embarrassed, who had crossed the line. In the hours that followed, commentators dissected every word. Some praised Warren's boldness, others said she had underestimated Kennedy. But among the noise, something quieter began to emerge. Messages from ordinary people. A teacher who wrote that Kennedy's words reminded her why she had entered public service. A veteran who said that respecting the past didn't mean fearing the future. A young student who admitted he had dismissed older leaders too quickly. Back in his office that evening, Kennedy sat alone for a moment, the day finally catching up with him. He wasn't celebrating, he wasn't gloating, he was tired. But it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from saying what needed to be said. He thought about how easily politics could turn people into caricatures, how quickly labels replaced listening. Across town, Warren also reflected. The comment she had made played back in her mind. She still believed in her vision, still believed in pushing forward, but she couldn't ignore the way Kennedy had responded, not with cruelty, but with conviction. It forced her to confront a truth that many avoided. Progress didn't have to mean disrespect. Days later, when the headlines faded and the next controversy took over, the exchange lingered in quieter ways. In classrooms, in dinner table conversations, in the minds of people who realized that humiliation doesn't always come from being shouted down. Sometimes it comes from being calmly, unmistakably outclassed. The story wasn't really about John Kennedy or Elizabeth Warren in the end. It was about something deeper. About how we treat those who came before us, about whether we believe wisdom expires with age, and about the power of responding to insult not with anger, but with clarity and purpose. In a world that often rewards the loudest voice, Kennedy's response served as a reminder that strength can be soft-spoken, that dignity can be disarming, and that the past, when respected, can guide us toward a better future. And for many who watched that day, it wasn't just a political moment, it was a lesson, one that would stay with them long after the cameras stopped rolling.